Amen. So we are in a series called Alter Ego, which we started last week. Don't worry if you missed the first one and you're thinking, oh no, I don't know what's going on. You can listen to today without having heard last week's, but should you wish to hear last week's, it's online. Just go to our YouTube channel and you will find it there. But we are considering at the moment something of what it is that God says we are, who it is that God says we are. And we are looking at two things. We're looking at the altar, and the altar, the A-L-T-A-R altar, so which was the place in sort of Old Testament history and where sacrifices were made. So we want to go to the place where sacrifices are made. We want to go to the altar of God. That's what we're trying to do, but what we're trying to take there is our ego, what we believe about ourselves. So over these 4 weeks, we're going to spend some time looking at some of the things where maybe, just maybe, we've been looking at who we are wrong and not been understanding who God says we are. We need to sacrifice who we think we are so that we can become who God says we are. That's what we're trying to do over these 4 weeks. Last week, if you were here, we were looking at laying down our feelings of inadequacy and how often in life we feel inadequate in many, many different ways. Maybe it's because things people have been putting on us, or maybe it's things we put on ourselves, but we were looking at our feelings of inadequacy. Today, I'm really excited. We're going to be looking at laying down our need for control, which I think is a brilliant topic because, believe it or not, we all need to control. If right now you're sat there going, I don't control anything, you have just proved myself right, that you are controlling that thought and ignoring what I'm saying. Next week, we're going to look at we're laying down our right to be offended. We live in a culture nowadays where almost like you're offended everywhere you go. You can't almost say hello to someone without offending someone, probably, in some way. We live in a world that's gone a bit crazy. And then finally, in the fourth week, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be looking at laying down our longing for approval. We now live in a culture, particularly where we are always looking for someone else's approval. And without that, we feel maybe not good enough. But we're going to look to sacrifice those things to become who God says we are. And today, I say, we are going to be looking at my need for control. And so first of all, I just wonder, in some area in your life, and you don't need to shout out the answers, these are rhetorical questions, do you like to be in control? More. And if you're sat next to someone who is trying to push up your arm right now, okay, they are controlling you as well as maybe where you're in control, okay? But we all like to be in control. But it's weird how control works out because for a lot of us, we are controlling in some areas, but in other areas, maybe not so much. We might be a bit lax. You know, for some of us, you might find you're a control freak at home. Your home has to be just right, everything perfect. But then you might go to work and think, oh, I don't really care as much here. Or it might be vice versa. It might be the other way around. You want to control everything at work, but when you come home, if any of your colleagues were to see what your house looked like, they'd be like, how are they a control freak? Their house is a state. There are dirty underwear everywhere. It's just a mess. The dishes haven't been done in days. How? For some of you, you might be control freaks over your finances. Every last penny will be accounted for. Every single receipt I will look through. And yet, you might have kids, and you let them do whatever they want. And right now, they're probably playing with scissors, standing on top of a work surface, and you're like, whatever. We tend to control some things, but not other things. In our house, it's the same. Sarah likes to have our house looking good. I am much more relaxed than that about the house. I care less about the house. Sarah likes to control certain things. One of our biggest things we have disagreements is over making the bed. Sarah likes the bed made. When she leaves for work when I'm still in bed. So I get up and I'm like, perfect, she's not here. So I don't need to, it's almost as an act of defiance. I do not make my side of the bed. And my excuse is I'm airing out the sheets. And but I also know when she comes home from work, if the bed is not made, someone will be having a word with me. And so Sarah likes to do this, but I like to control other things in the house. I don't care about the bed, but it could be the remote control. Ooh, how many of you are there? I don't know. I'm letting you into some weird things here. Whenever it's the remote control for the TV, there's always someone in the house who has to have it with them, either in their hand or next to them at all times. And also, I could be like this. The volume level has got to be an even number or end in a 0 or a 5. Anyone else feel my need for control there? Yeah, that's where I'm at. So my need for control is there. I have to, and if it's the same with the car radio as well. It's got to be an even number or 0 or 5. Otherwise, I can't. I don't know what it is. It's something weird. My need for control kicks in, and I will do the volume 1 or 2, whatever it needs to be to get to that. I also have my loft space. It's my need for control. Last Sunday, went home. We decided seasons are changing. Going to go up in the loft space. I'd spent hours organizing into nice, neat rows of different size clothes for the kids as they grow up. I got up there. Chaos had happened. Somebody else had been in the loft. I know. I had to spend 2 hours relining the shoes up, size 2, size 3, size 4. In the end, it was okay. I gained control back, and my loft now looks neat, and everyone is banned from going in there, apart from me. But we like to control things, don't we, in life? We all have different things that we like to control. So despite what you think, I guarantee there is an area you like to control. But there's often 2 things that we like to control in life. And they're this. It's people and circumstances. They're the 2 things we like to control, people and circumstances. And sometimes when it comes to people, we think that we are God's gift to that person to control them. God has given me to you to control your life. So you might as well just let me get on with it because I'm just using my gift that God has given me. And that's what we think. Some of us think like that. And your life will never be on track until you let me come in and control it. So you might as well give in right now because I'm not giving up. I will control your life. And actually, there's 1 or 2 things about you that bother me. And until you've surrendered those things to my control, you will never be walking in the life that God has for you. What happens, we like to micromanage people. Sometimes we manipulate to get our way. We can be passive-aggressive. We can give the silent treatment, all to gain the control that we need. But then our circumstances we like to control as well. We like to control the circumstances, how our kids look, how we look. Is our house perfect? Is our garden perfect? What's my schedule like? We like to control these things. We like to control what you look like when you come here on a Sunday morning. Has my hair been brushed? Has it not been brushed? Not been brushed. But we like to control these things, don't we? We want to control the circumstances we go into. We control so many different things. It could be how my car looks. When I turn up to church on a Sunday morning, my car will be the cleanest car in the car park. I am going to control that. It's a good thing you probably don't park near my car because it is the dirtiest car that you will probably see. But we like to control circumstances. And you see, the reason we want to be in control, because often our ego is out of control. You say, we often think we know that the right thing to do, therefore we must control the person or circumstance we're involved with. And ego, if we look at this word ego, it's often thinking, I know best. But today I want to think about it like this. I want to think ego as edging God out. That's how we're going to think about it today when it comes to control. Edging God out. And actually, there is a verse in the Bible that is the theme verse for all those control freaks out there. Okay? It is Proverbs 3, 5-6, and I'm reading it from the CFV. Okay, it says this. Trust in the Lord with some of your heart, and lean on your own understanding. In some of your ways, acknowledge him, and you will make your paths straight. Now, for those of you that have been around the Bible long enough, you will know that is not what the Bible says. But I was reading from the CFV, the control freak version, that tells us that we only need to trust in God with some of our heart. Not all of our heart. The actual Bible says trust in the Lord with all of your heart. But the control freak version, only some. I don't need to give it all to him. And we need to learn to lean on our own understanding. No. We need to learn to lean on his understanding. Not ours, his understanding. In some of our ways, no. We need to learn in all of our ways. We need to acknowledge him. And you will not make your path straight, but he will make your path straight. But some of us, I say, we live with this control freak version of the Bible. But the trouble is, the more that you try to control, the more you're afraid of losing control, the more you try to control. And we end up in this vicious cycle that goes round and round and round. And actually, it probably spirals down and down and down out of control in this cycle of fear where control has gone bad. Well, if I can't control that very well, I better add that to it, and then I better add that to it, and then I better add that to it. And before you know, you are in this fear and crippling anxiety because all these areas of your life are not in control in the way that you want them. And the question is, are we in our lives starting to edge God out because of the control? And we're going to look a little bit at a man called Abraham, or originally Abram and Sarai, who became Abraham and Sarah. We're going to look at a bit in Genesis 16 in just a moment. See, Abraham tried to control different situations in his life. Don't worry. Abraham tried to control different situations in his life. Early in his life, there was a situation in his life where he ends up going before some people and they wanted to know who Sarah was. And rather than tell the people that this is my wife, what did he say? He said, this is my sister. He was trying to control his circumstances because he thought he knew better than God. Now, eventually in the story, they find out that it's not his sister and it is his wife. But he was trying to control these circumstances. And you see, what happens in Abraham and Sarah's life, this happens a number of times. Abraham and Sarah, they get this promise from God. God makes this big promise to them where one day they'll have so many descendants, it's going to be more than they can count. There's going to be so many people that come from their sort of family line, it's going to be incredible. God makes this promise to them. But what happens is Abraham and Sarah try to take control of their own destiny because it wasn't happening in their timing. And this is where a lot of us end up. Let's read this together from Genesis 16, verses 1 to 4. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. But she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abraham agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. What we're finding here is Abraham and Sarah are starting to get on a bit in life. God had made a promise. There's going to be generations and generations that come through you, more than you can count. And what ends up happening? Well, it's not happening in our timing. God, you've told me something's going to happen, but it's not happened yet. I better take control of that situation and make it happen myself. And we end up in this most chaotic situation where his wife is going to say, "Oh, go and sleep with her and have a baby with her." Maybe that's the answer that God came up with. They're edging God out and trying to take control of their situation. You see, and what ends up happening is from this situation where they've tried to take control, chaos happens for centuries and centuries after. Chaos and calamity happens. You may think, well, how? Well, let's look at it. Well, what happened is Hagar has a child named Ishmael. Sarah eventually has a child called Isaac. Okay? You may think no problem. Well, the descendants of Ishmael, do we know who they are today? It's the Palestinians. And the descendants of Isaac, who are they? The Jews. And so something that happened centuries ago is still causing chaos today, literally on our news every single day, because God was edged out. Someone tried to take control of the situation. You may think, oh, it's maybe just a small situation I'm going to take control of in my life. But sometimes the ramifications can go on for centuries. And from those lines, Muhammad comes from the lineage of Ishmael, and Christianity comes from the lineage of Isaac. Can we start to see how these decisions that were made where control was taken affected generations and generations of people? So the question is, do you edge God out? Again, it's a rhetorical question. I'm not expecting hands up. And it could be in all sorts of areas in your life. Do you edge God out? For instance, I'm going to hit the big one to start with, finances. Do you edge God out of your finances? His Bible seems to say I should be sort of giving away something into the church. Do I edge God out of that? What do I do with that? Do I take his word as was what it says and do something with it? Or do I edge God out and think, I know better? I'm going to control that. Maybe it's your job. Do you edge God out of your job in some way? Do you take control or realize, well, actually, he has gifted me in a certain way. It's now time to walk in the gifting he has given me, rather than maybe for some of you, your resume says you can do things that you can't do. You know, you can ride a horse or you can play piano. I don't know what your resume might say, what your CV might say. But do you exaggerate on it because you try and edge God out rather than how he's gifted you? You're trying to pretend you're gifted in other ways. Or maybe you edge God out because you think, oh, that new thing is coming out. I'd really like to buy it, but I can't afford it. So you know what? I'm going to borrow the money for that because that would be great to have that. And so you make some poor decisions where you edge God out, and then the consequences might go on for generations and generations in your family as there is debt being repaid. Now here is the thing. I'm hoping I'm starting to paint a picture that control is something that affects us all. And this is what I want us all to do. And this is what I want us all to try and work out at home this week, in life groups, if you're in a life group this week. If you're not, come and speak to me. We'll try and get you in one. I want you to name what you are trying to control. I don't know what you're trying to control. You know. I know what I am, but I don't know what you're trying to control. I want you to name what that is, because until we name what it is, sometimes it's really hard to lay it down at the altar of God. I want you to spend some time. And here's some examples of things it could be. It could be, if you have them, kids. You're trying to control your kids. But if I force them to do this, they'll turn out like this and everything will be okay. You can't do that. You can lead them a certain direction, but you can't force them and control them. Maybe it's still your grown-up kids. You're still controlling them if you've got them. Maybe you think it's for their own good because they don't know what they're doing. Maybe it's time to relinquish control. Maybe. Just maybe. Okay? You need to let them go and trust God. Maybe if you're at work, it's your co-workers. You're trying to control them, what they do, how they work. Now, there's an element where maybe they need some help, but you're not there to control them. Maybe it's your image. Maybe if I just have a certain image, look a certain way, everything will be okay. Everyone will think I've got life together. What is it? And maybe you're sat here right now thinking, I'm not doing this stupid exercise. Well, fair enough. You've just proved to me that you've got some control issues in your life that need to be let go of. Maybe that's where you need to start. But what I want to do today is I want to ask 3 questions that are going to help us lay down what we are trying to control. Whatever that thing is. Maybe there's more than one thing. I'm not judging you on that, but what is it? First question I want us to consider is this. Is it worth my concern? So whatever you're trying to control, is it worth your concern? And I want to look for a moment at a story in Luke 10, verses 41 and 42. Here we have Jesus, and he's come along and says, Martha, Martha. The Lord answered, you're worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. You see, here we have this situation where you've got these sisters, and one is sat at the feet of Jesus and with him, and one is busy doing everything, trying to control everything, sort everything out. And I think, for me, this is one of the biggest stories that we read from the Bible that speaks into today's world. We try and control everything. And you may think, well, I don't anymore. Well, but we do. I've spoken about it before, with a Sabbath day, having a day of rest, a day off. Do we do that? We struggle to stop, don't we? We need to control it. But firstly, is it your concern? Is it your concern? Like, she was concerned about this house being perfect, where she missed out. Actually, perfect was sat there waiting to talk to her. He didn't care what her house looked like. He just wanted to be with her. Is it worth your concern? I find this as well, and this is a challenge to me. Is it my concern, and I struggle with this, that when I open my dishwasher, people have not loaded it the right way? Is it my concern that my kids have if we can get them to put the plates and bowls in, that they've put them in and they're touching and they're not going to get cleaned? Is the world going to end if that is the case? No, John, it is not going to end if that is the case. Okay? Is it worth my concern? Is it worth me getting so stressed over? No, it is not worth me getting so stressed over if my dishwasher is not made in a certain way. Also, in the same point, is it worth my concern getting so stressed over if my bed is not made every morning? No, it is not. Is it my concern if I turn up to church and I haven't brushed my hair? No. You can all turn up next week with unbrushed hair. Okay? There you go. Permission. Is it worth my concern? Sometimes we lose so much sleep over this stuff. But is it really worth our concern? Are we missing out spending time with Jesus? Do we spend so long trying to get ready to meet with Jesus that we then run out of time to be with him? I think sometimes we do. Is it worth my concern? Is it worth my concern that my car currently has some mud splattered upside? No, it is not. Jesus is not going to judge me one day on whether my car is dirty or not. Some of you are twitching in your seats right now. And it's funny in life, isn't it, how things that we think are worth our concern sometimes aren't. Over the past number of years, I've got into my gardening. I enjoy gardening, and my back garden, I like it. Every year, I put grass seed down to try and fill in spots, dead spots, where kids have been playing football or cricket or whatever it might be. And I am gradually starting to learn that I cannot control the grass in my garden. Because no matter what happens, those children are going to be playing out there. And I'm slowly having to learn to embrace the dead spot on my garden. There may come a day where I can grow grass, but right now, with children and a dog, I give up. Is it worth my concern? Do I need to be up in the middle of the night watering my grass or dead spot to try and bring it back to life? No, it is not worth my concern. I would like it to look nice. However, my children seem to be having fun. My dog needs to go to the toilet, and I'd rather that outside than inside. So, is it worth my concern? Is it time to embrace the dead spot? So firstly, is it worth my concern? Secondly, I want you to consider, is it mine to control? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes there are certain things we have been given to control, and sometimes not. But I want us to realize that surrendering control is not the same thing as relinquishing responsibility. Sometimes you need to take control of a situation, but sometimes you need to let go of responsibility. So, for instance, if you're in a tough financial position right now in life, You have some responsibility. You might not be able to control everything, but you have some responsibility with that. So if you're struggling financially, you still have some responsibility to maybe budget, to look at your finances, to see where you're overspending, to see where you can cut back. That might be where you're at. You might be worried about people in your life. You can't control everything in their life, but there might be simple things you can do. You can want the best for them, but you can't control them. You might have to say relationships that are struggling, and no matter how much you try time and time again to control that person, to get them to do what you want to do, they don't do it. They keep making the same mistakes, keep ending up in chaotic situations, keep hurting themselves, and you end up in cycles of fear and anxiety because it's not yours to control, it's their life. Doesn't mean you don't care, but sometimes we need to surrender control. In fact, James 4:13 and 14 tells us this. He says, "Now listen, you who say, 'Today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money.' Why? You do not know what will happen. You do not even know what will happen tomorrow." The trouble is, for some of us in life, we try and control things, but we don't even know what's going to happen today or tomorrow. So how can we try and control things that are outside of our care? I see some people who are so caught up in making sure things are perfect for next year or the year after or for the generations to come. You don't know what is going to happen. What happens if Jesus comes back today? You're not exactly going to be cashing in your pension before you go, are you? And I think sometimes we try and control things where God is saying, stop stressing. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be responsible, but I think sometimes we're controlled by some things more than we need to be. And we need to let them go because you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. Stop trying to control things. It's not always yours to control. And finally, after we've considered, is it worth my concern? Is it mine to control? I want us to consider, is it for God alone? One of my favorite verses in the Bible is this. It's Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. It says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." When it comes to things we are trying to control, we need to be asking the question, is what I'm trying to control for God alone? Because we need to start learning to lay it down before Him. What are those areas? Where are the areas where we're trying to control what we can't? Because when we try and control what you can't, what happens? We get anxious. What does this verse tell us? Do not be anxious about anything. You might think, how? Well, but in everything, we lay it down before God. It's the only way that we are going to start fighting this control in our lives. It's the only way we can fight this anxiety, this fear that seems to be crippling us and never going away, is by giving it to God. And what happens when we bring it to God, we present these things to God? It gives us peace. A peace which knows no limits. He guards our hearts. You see, the reality is we try and control much and we live in fear. We need to realize we shouldn't be consumed with fear. We need to consider relinquishing it all and surrendering it to the altar of God. Can you change your spouse or your loved one? No, you can't. Can God change them? And I don't mean change them for someone else, by the way, at this point. I'm going to put out. Can God change them? Yes, He can. You can't in your own strength. You can try and try and try again, but I tell you what, it's going to be pretty miserable. God can. You can come to God. You can present your prayers, your requests to God. You can lay it all before Him and say, God, I'm trusting you with this. Can you heal your loved one? No. But can God heal your loved one? Yes, he can. Stop trying to do it in your own strength. Lay it down before God. This is for God alone. He is the one who sits on the throne, not you or I. It is him. Can you control your future or anyone else's future? No. You cannot control your future or anyone else's future. But you know who can? God. He can control your future. We've got to start learning to lay these things down at the altar of God. Lay down your control where you think, I've got the right answer to solve this problem, this person, and that person. Go, actually, God, I can't do it. You can. I'm going to present it to you. I'm going to surrender it to you and let you take control. And going right back to Abraham, who we thought about at the beginning, he tried to control. What did Abraham want most in life? It was a son. That's what he wanted most in life, a son. What did God give him? A son. But then what did God ask him to sacrifice? His son. The very thing that he wanted the most, God then asks him to sacrifice. And if you're not familiar with this story, what happens is Abraham, he was wanting to control things, but God says to him, I want you to sacrifice your son Isaac. So he takes his son. They go, they collect some firewood, and they go and they go up together to a place to sacrifice his son. And Isaac's probably looking around thinking, well, why is Dad sharpening a knife right now? There seems to be no animal around here for a sacrifice. I'll go with it. He's Dad. I trust him. They're walking up together and they start building this place for sacrifice. And Isaac's still, where on earth is the sacrifice? I don't know. And then he gets to the point where the son he gets his son, puts him down, ready to sacrifice him. Knife up. Ready to sacrifice his son. And what happens at that moment is God says stop. He can see at that point that Abraham wasn't trying to control his own destiny, his own future, what was going to happen. He could see finally that Abraham was willing to trust God, trust that the Lord will provide a sacrifice, finally, after all these years. And what happens at that point is they find a ram that all of a sudden just appeared. God provides when Abraham lets go. And we read this in Genesis 22, 13 and 14. Abraham went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. The Lord will provide. You see, when Abraham surrendered control of what he wanted most, what he was trying to control, he saw the amazing provision of God in his life. More than he could have ever seen or done by himself. You see, when he stopped edging God out and started exalting God only, he found the peace that transcends all understanding. And so we come back to those questions again. What are you trying to control? Where have you been edging God out, but you need to exalt God only? What is it that God is asking you to sacrifice on his altar and say, God, I can't do this. You need to do this. What do you need to lay down?